The phone call lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because I stared at the screen after it ended, watching the timer freeze, then disappear, the way moments do when they are over but not yet processed. 4 minutes and 11 seconds in which my father said things that had been building, I understood now, for years. Things that had been assembled quietly in the space between his disappointment and his pride, between what he had wanted me to become and what I had actually become, until they had enough weight to finally fall. "Don't come home for the holidays," he said. His voice was not angry. That was the part that stayed with me longest afterward, the absence of heat, the flat, decided tone of a man who had made a calculation and arrived at a conclusion. "You've made your choices. We've made ours. I think some distance would be good for everyone." "Dad, I'm not asking you to agree with me," he said. "I'm telling you how things are." The call ended. I set my phone on my desk and looked out the window of my office at the city below. Atlanta in October. The trees beginning their slow turn, the streets holding the last warmth of a season preparing to change. My name is Lauren Pierce. I am 33 years old. And this is the story of how my father told me not to come home, and what I left on his kitchen table before I walked out of his life for the last time. My father, James Pierce, was a man built from a specific American template, the kind that value work you can point to, progress you can measure, success that arrives in recognizable forms. He had worked 31 years as a civil engineer for the same firm. He had built a comfortable life in a 4-bedroom colonial in Marietta, Georgia, the same house he and my mother had purchased when I was 3 years old, the house where I had grown up, the house whose mortgage he had paid with the methodical reliability of a man who considered financial obligation a moral category. He had paid it off 6 years ago. He had told me the day the final payment cleared with the particular satisfaction of someone completing something that had always been meant to be completed. 30 years, he had said, and now it's ours. He meant his and my mother's. He did not know, could not have known, that the house had, in a technical and legally binding sense, been mine for the past 2 years. I need to explain how that happened. 4 years ago, my mother had called me with the kind of careful, structured calm that I recognized immediately as the voice she used when she was managing something she did not want to alarm me with. "Your father's firm is restructuring," she said. "There may be some changes to his position." The changes, it turned out, were significant. At 58, my father was offered a package, generous on paper, devastating in practice for a man whose identity was load-bearing on his professional role. He took it because the alternative was a diminished position that would have cost him something he could not afford to lose. What followed was 2 years of adjustment that my mother described to me in carefully edited versions during our weekly calls. My father was consulting. My father was considering options. My father was taking some time. What she did not tell me, what I learned from my aunt, who had always been more direct than diplomatic, was that the consulting was not generating income. The options were not materializing, and the time my father was taking was quietly consuming the savings they had spent 30 years building. There was also, my aunt mentioned in the same conversation, the matter of the property taxes. The house was paid off, but not free. Property taxes on a 4-bedroom colonial in Marietta had increased significantly, and on a fixed income with depleting savings, they had become a weight. I had asked my aunt how much. She had told me. I had done what I always did when confronted with a problem that had a financial solution. I had found the financial solution. I had been building quietly for 8 years. Pierce Capital Management was not a large firm. 12 employees, a focused portfolio, a reputation in Atlanta's real estate and private equity community for careful work and reliable returns. I had started it at 25 with the proceeds of a property I had purchased and renovated at 23, funded by 4 years of aggressive saving from a position at an investment bank where I had worked 70-hour weeks and spent almost nothing. My father had not approved of the investment bank. Too volatile, he thought, for a first job. Too much pressure for someone just starting out. He had suggested the engineering firm where his college roommate was a senior manager. I had thanked him and taken the bank position. He had not approved of leaving the bank to start my own firm either. Too risky. Too soon. Not enough experience. Not enough capital. Not enough of the specific, measurable, pointable to kind of progress he understood. I had thanked him and started the firm anyway. This was the pattern of our relationship for 8 years. His concern expressing itself as disapproval. My choices expressing themselves as evidence of recklessness, neither of us quite able to bridge the gap between his language and mine. And then the restructuring had happened, and I had made a decision that I had told no one about except my attorney and my accountant. I had paid the outstanding property taxes on my parents' house, not as a gift, as a purchase. A quiet, structured transaction in which the tax lien, unpaid and accumulating, was resolved through a legal mechanism that transferred a technical ownership interest in the property to a holding company I controlled. My parents did not know. The transaction was handled at the county level, handled with discretion, handled in a way that changed nothing about their daily lives. They still lived in the house. They still thought of it as theirs. The only difference was that the document at the county recorder's office told a slightly different story. I had not planned to use this. I had done it because it needed to be done, and because my father's pride would not have survived the alternative, and because I loved him. In the complicated, bruised way that you love people who cannot quite see you. And I did not want him to lose the thing he had spent 30 years paying for. I had not planned for him to tell me not to come home. The 3 weeks between the phone call and Christmas were quiet in the way that things are quiet when you are making a decision and have not yet made it. I spoke to my mother twice. She was careful, diplomatic in the way she was always diplomatic when she was caught between my father's decisions and her own feelings, which were, I knew, more complicated than her voice suggested. "He's proud," she said on the second call, as though pride explained everything. As though pride were a sufficient accounting for 4 minutes and 11 seconds of a door being closed. "I know," I said. "He doesn't mean, Mom." I said it gently. He said what he said. She was quiet. "I'm going to come," I said. "Not for Christmas dinner. Just once. There's something I need to leave." I drove to Marietta on a Wednesday morning in December. Not Christmas. Not a holiday. A Wednesday, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of day that does not announce itself. I had called ahead only to confirm my mother would be home. I had not told her why I was coming or what I was bringing. I had simply said I needed to stop by, that it wouldn't take long, that she didn't need to prepare anything. She was waiting at the door when I pulled into the driveway. She had the expression she wore when she was trying to read a situation before it arrived. Slightly watchful, holding herself in a posture of prepared neutrality, my father's car was in the driveway. I had not expected that. I sat in my car for a moment. Then I picked up the envelope from the passenger seat, a standard legal envelope, my attorney's return address in the corner, my parents' address in my own handwriting on the front, and I went inside. My father was in the living room. He looked up when I walked in, and something crossed his face that I could not fully read. Not quite surprise, because my mother had told him I was coming, but something more complicated. Something that had not resolved itself into a position yet. He did not stand, he did not speak. My mother hovered in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, with the careful stillness of someone who has decided to witness rather than intervene. I did not sit down. I crossed the living room to the coffee table in front of him. The same coffee table that had been in this room my entire life. The one with the small circular mark on the left corner from a mug someone had set down without a coaster when I was 7, and I placed the envelope on it. I set it down without drama, without ceremony, without the speech I had written and revised and finally discarded, because the document said everything the speech would have said, and said it more clearly. My father looked at the envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it," I said. He picked it up. His hands were the hands I had known my whole life. Large, careful, the hands of a man who built things and checked his work. He opened the envelope with the methodical deliberateness he applied to everything. Running his thumb under the seal, without tearing it, he removed the document. I watched him read. I watched the moment he reached the legal description of the property, the address, the county, the parcel number, all the specific language of a real estate transfer document. I watched him read it once, quickly, the way you read something when you are not sure what you are reading. Then I watched him read it again, slowly, the way you read something when you understand exactly what you are reading and need to make sure. He looked up. His face was doing something I had never seen it do. Not anger, not pride, not the flat, decided expression of the phone call 3 weeks ago. Something open. Something that had not been open in a long time. "You own this house," he said, not a question. "The holding company does," I said, "which I control. I transferred full title to you and Mom this morning. That document is the completed deed. The house is yours. Actually, legally, completely yours, as of today." He looked at the document again. "The taxes," he said. "Resolved," I said. 2 years ago. That's how the holding company acquired the interest. I didn't want you to lose it." The room was absolutely still. My mother had moved from the doorway. She was standing near the entrance to the living room, her hand pressed flat against the wall as though she needed something solid. 2 years ago, my father said. "Yes, you've been." He stopped. "Paying attention," I said. "That's all." He set the document down on the coffee table, carefully, precisely, aligned with the edge the way he aligned everything. "I told you not to come home," he said. "I know, and you came anyway." "I came to bring that," I said. "I'm not staying." I picked up my keys from where I had set them on the table beside the envelope. I turned toward the door. "Lauren." His voice was different. It was the voice from before the firm, before the restructuring, before the years of disapproval had built the distance between us into something that required architecture to describe. It was the voice from when I was 7 years old and he was teaching me to check my work. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I gave him a moment. I gave myself a moment. Then I turned. He was standing now. He had not stood when I walked in, but he was standing now. And without the sitting position to anchor him, he looked, for the first time in my memory, like a man who was not entirely certain of the ground beneath him. "I was wrong," he said. 3 words. My father, James Pierce, civil engineer, 31 years with the same firm. The man who had spent my entire adult life cataloging my risks. Said 3 words that I understood had cost him something real. I looked at him across the living room. Across the coffee table with its circular mark. Across the document that said, in the language of county recorders and legal descriptions, that I had been paying attention for 2 years while he had been disappointed in me. "I know," I said. "The firm." He paused. "After the restructuring, I felt like I had nothing, and you were out there doing things I didn't understand, and I couldn't." He stopped again. "I couldn't ask. It felt like asking was admitting something." "I know that too," I said. "How did you know about the taxes?" "Aunt Vera told me." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course she did." My mother had begun to cry, silently the way she cried, with the practiced containment of a woman who had spent 40 years being the emotional regulator of a household that valued composure. I crossed the room. I hugged her first, held her for a long moment in the way that I had not held her in longer than I wanted to count. Then I turned to my father. He opened his arms, and I walked into them the way I had when I was small. Before the gap had opened, before the distance had accumulated into something that required a deed transfer and a Wednesday morning drive to begin to close. We did not fix everything that day. I want to be honest about that. The same honesty I always want to bring to the parts of these stories that sentimentality tends to smooth over. We did not fix everything in a living room in December with a legal document on a coffee table. What we did was begin. My father asked, over coffee that my mother made while we sat at the kitchen table for the first time in 3 years, as though sitting together at a kitchen table were an ordinary thing, about the firm. He asked real questions, specific, financially literate questions that reminded me he was, underneath the disapproval, a man who understood structure and discipline and the long game. I answered them directly. No simplified version. No edited palatability. He listened. At one point he asked about a specific investment approach I used, and I explained it, and he was quiet for a moment and then said, "That's smart," in the tone of a man who does not offer that assessment lightly. It was, in its small way, the most significant thing he had said to me in 8 years. Pierce Capital Management is still growing. The portfolio now includes 7 properties in the Atlanta metro area, 2 commercial investments, and a partnership with a development firm that is building affordable housing in neighborhoods I grew up knowing and care about in ways that are not purely financial. My parents came to the office last spring. My father walked through it the way my mother had walked through my sister's gallery years ago, taking in the details, the people, the physical evidence of something built and operating and real. He stopped at my desk. He picked up a framed photograph I keep there, the 2 of us when I was 8, at a construction site where he was working that summer, both of us wearing hard hats 3 sizes too large. He set it down carefully. "You got it from me, you know," he said, without looking up. "The way you think about building things." I let that sit for a moment. "I know," I said. He looked up then. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "You're seeing it now," I said. He nodded. That was enough. Outside, Atlanta moved through its afternoon. Traffic, construction, the constant motion of a city that builds and rebuilds without ceremony, without waiting for permission, without requiring anyone to announce that what is being built is worth building. I had built something worth building, in silence, in patience, in the long years of becoming while someone I loved could not yet see it. The deed was signed. The house was theirs. And I had come home, not when he told me not to, but when it mattered. That, I had learned, was the difference between obedience and love. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe, like, and consider sharing it with those who have ever been separated from their home.